And it was community college, and he was living at home, and it was completely floored him. And he became depressed. He became really saddened that he wasn't doing good in his classes, and it had nothing to do with his education prior to that. He was not emotionally ready to handle all of these things. These professors couldn't have cared less about him. I mean, it wasn't about learning. It wasn't a learning environment. So it was a very sad time for him and for us, because I felt like doing it over again, I would have not done that. I would have kept him. We didn't have a Challenge 3 class for him to attend because I was the mom that had the oldest kids in our community. So I had to make adjustments and make it work for what we had available. Now our community is full, Challenge A through 4, 12 students in each class, and you know they're dynamic classes, and it's wonderful. But it had to start somewhere, and I was the mom that had to kind of take the, to step out in faith and say, I do believe that CC was an answer to prayer, and in obedience to what God's called me to do, we're going to do this, and we'll make it work. So he struggled, but now he is back full-time in school and working part-time at Chick-fil-A. It's our favorite place in the world. All 3 of my kids have been employed with them, and it's a great company. So we'll see what the Lord has for him. He's going into business. Elijah, he is my he's 19 now. He turned 19 in November. He is a freshman at Georgia Tech this year, and he is a Division I tennis player, so he was recruited to play tennis. All 3 of my kids played sports. We all played tennis. The 2 older ones decided they didn't want to pursue that. Lauren was going into nursing at first and then changed her major after 2 years. And I believe the only reason she had the confidence to do that was because of CC. She had the skills, even for those 2 years that she did Challenge 2 and then went down to Challenge 1, and then she graduated. With just those 2 years of getting up in front and doing debates and doing speeches and memorizing, just that confidence level of having the skills to learn. She learned the language of Latin in 2 years and could translate anything. And that gave her confidence to when she switched majors. She's like, oh, that's not going to be a big deal. I know how to learn. I know. She was on an accelerated science program to get her nursing degree faster. So over the 2 years, she took all of the hardest science classes that you could take. That's kind of the accelerated. And got B's and C's. It was she was very upset with the C, but she did get a C 1 year. But she came home and she's like, Mom, I'm not a science student, but I know how to learn the science. And she's showing me the rings of vocabulary words and the tools that she was given in the challenge to be able to learn Latin. That's what she applied to that hard science material that she was covering. So I don't know why I went off on that story. Elijah, he's my only child. He had the benefit of going, he had 1 year of cycle 3. And I was the essentials tutor that year, so all 3 of my kids got essentials because they were my guinea pigs at home. I practiced all the games. So he had 1 year of foundations and then completed A through 4. And he was for the majority of the time, with the same students the whole time. So if you have this utopia of a CC experience, I feel like Elijah had that experience. He was always with the same students. He had between 10 and 12 each year. He graduated with 11 of his friends, because he was one of the 12. And it just ended up being a wonderful thing. For him, it was a very different experience for him than it was for my other 2. My other 2, they're drowning with the work. It was the first time that we had all these papers to write, and I felt by the time Elijah came along, I had a grasp of it, as a parent, and I was able to help him walk through that. My 4 older ones, they just, we all just fluttered above the water, trying to help tutors and directors for the first time. But as he went through, there were different struggles that he had that the other 2 had. And what I loved about CC is that it fit all 3 of my kids. So as a homeschool mom, I was, up to that point, I had one child doing these types of things and working on this and reading this book, and then the other kids, one was doing this science, and we kind of did science all together. I really was classically educating, and I didn't know it, but I felt like they were all just spread out until CC came. And even in the challenge program, they're all doing different things, But the idea of asking questions and conversations were just happening in our house, and it was a wonderful thing. Elijah struggled with getting up and speaking, and not that he is afraid, he's not nervous, he just doesn't like it. He doesn't like to be a performer. So I'll share some funny stories about that. But one thing it did do for him, as a Division I tennis player, he has been recruited from different colleges. So our whole senior year really was spent going to visiting schools, sitting down, and those athletic directors and coaches wanted to interview him. Okay, so we can see you play on the tennis court, let's get to know you. And I can only attest that it was CC that gave him the confidence to sit and look at athletic directors, have really good questions for them. And when it was all said and done, they would be, we've never had kids really ask us those kinds of questions before. And one of the questions ending up being at Georgia Tech, my spiritual growth is important. What is here at the school that will help me, maintain that? Now, he does not carry around his Bible. He's not like this super spiritual boy. But for him to ask that question, and then to find out that all three of those coaches were Christians. At the most, I was scared to death to send him to Georgia Tech, the academic, I think academic is anti-God because they know it all, right? Everybody at Georgia Tech knows everything, so they don't need to know what God has. But so that was encouraging for the coaches, and that actually is what made them call us back and say, we don't only need him or want him on our team, we need him on our team because we can only affect change so much. So the struggle with math, oh well, he now is in an environment where he's going to be tested, and it will. I claim to the promise that God's word won't return void, and that he is going to be successful. So those are, that is, and that's my husband in the middle too. I'll introduce him too. We've been married for 23 years and happily married, and excited about the season that we're in with our kids. But the point here is that CC met every one of them where they needed and gave them the confidence to move forward in this season of their life. So that was exciting. Since we have some experience here in the classical model, if I were to ask you, can you define a classical education for me? I know Lee Bortons, so the founder of this whole thing, in her book, Echo and Celebration, has a definition. I'm asking you because I don't know it by memory now. It's been so long since I've looked, and I didn't look at Annette's House with the Echo and Celebration book. So, those of you with experience, how would you define a classical education? What makes an education classical? Anyone? Go ahead.
The trivium.
Okay. So trivium is what?
The grammar, dialects, and things.
Okay, good. What is it about the trivium that why would we put that in our classical definition? Because it's not an academic subject, right? What is it?
Stages of learning?
It's the stages of learning. So it's exactly what our minds are doing. And within those stages, we then have the tools of learning that can apply to any subject, right? So is a curriculum or a program classical just because they teach Latin? No, it doesn't have anything to do with the academic, or they read classic literature, or they, do any sorts of things as you think about and thinking through of all the classical schools we have in our area. How we define it, it's the skills of learning through the 3 stages, okay? And our students from beginning, birth, our kids are in the grammar stage when they're 6 months old, okay? And they begin just processing, going through this spiral of learning, grammar, dialectic, rhetoric. How many of you are in the grammar stage of something? What are you in the grammar stage of, Annette? Okay. All right. How about you? You raise your hand.
I'm a first-year director.
Okay. Grammar stage. Yes. For Foundations Challenge?
Foundations.
Okay. Good. So definitely grammar stage. What else? What are you?
I'm the grammar stage of cake decorating.
Cake decorating. That's fun. So to get to the dialectic stage, what are you going to be doing? What's kind of the process there?
Asking a lot of questions.
Okay.
And I'm learning what each tip, there's like 1,000 tips you can
Yes.
do. So what
makes-
each one's for, and I'm watching a lot of YouTube videos.
It's wonderful. I'll tell you, we changed a battery using YouTube, didn't we? Or jumped a battery. We did.
Oh,
It's like a lot of Paris theater. Last year, no, we didn't change, no.
Okay.
We jumped a car,
Wow.
watching a YouTube video.
Yeah, you can't find anything.
You can. So the idea is, even though, we have challenge age students, they're going to be in the grammar stage of something the whole time they're in challenge. When you hit challenge 4 and you dive into Ravi Zacharias, Jesus Among Other Gods, you will be in the grammar stage for a little while, because that's, information maybe they don't know about yet. And they'll quickly process through that. So good. So subject studied does not make an education classical, and the way it is studied is what makes it classical. So just kind of clarifying that, that's our working definition as we move forward into the challenge program. We'll talk a lot about subject matter. We have great books that we read, but the focus won't ever be the books. The focus are going to be the strands of learning that we'll talk about. Okay? One thing I like to say here, of course our mission, hopefully you all know what our mission is, to know God and to make Him known. And we believe that our children are knowing God when they're memorizing all of that grammar and foundations. And we're hoping, this year, our whole leadership theme was a biblical worldview, integrating God in every aspect of our CC day. So are there any foundations tutors here? Yes? Do you put God in the center? Did you see that picture? So they make these beautiful boards that have all the grammar, the new grammar for the week, and God is in the center, and then they have all of the grammar pieces that they're going to be memorizing. And when you erase everything, guess who's left? God. And I can't tell you, I did a community visit a few weeks ago, and I was in the Abecedarian class, which is my favorite. That's the little ones, the 4-year-olds. And she erased everything. This is about week 7, so they've been coming pretty regular, and a little boy asked, why is God always left when we're finished? Why is He always still there? And that director was just able to give a quick little, God is always here. And it was the sweetest thing, and to see it integrated that way, it was beautiful. So if you don't put God in the center of your boards, do it. It starts conversations, especially with those little ones. So to know God and to make Him known, the idea here is we can contemplate and talk about the modern education, so this modern era of how we are educating. I want to flip that backwards with what we do, and I want to say that we are educating from a different purpose. The era, they focus, if you think of a typical elementary school day, there's lots of hands-on manipulatives, and they go on field trips, and they take trips to the bathroom, and there is some learning in there. I'm not saying, I was in a public school, but they sure do spend a lot of time doing stuff that doesn't mean anything, When we know that if we had our kids at home, we could do all that stuff in an hour and a half and be done with our day. It doesn't take 4 or 5 hours to do it. We also, they are not teaching from a place of authority, because our culture is telling us that there is no absolute truth. And so at a very young age, it's all subjective. It all just kind of happens, and then they start talking about, the Big Bang or evolution, and it all just kind of happened. There is no authority with it. So I would challenge us to flip it and to say that our education, Christians are, with an ARE,